Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogmen, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, how's everybody doing? Good? Everything's good. I'm gonna do my according to Progressive commercial. I'm gonna talk about the weather and stuff like that because everybody asks me. Yeah, I'm always saying it's hot. And then, okay, hold on. That's my timer going off. No, it's not one of my inopportune adult children that have perfect timing. No, it's not. That was a timer that went off. But anyway, I checked the weather for obvious reasons, but all of a sudden I'm looking at something that says Arctic blast. And I was like, are you kidding me? An Arctic blast? All right, why not? And sure enough, like tonight, it's supposed to be dropping like in the early morning hours, like into 69. Okay, now it doesn't have itself. It's in the 90s during the daytime. And that's like, God, that's like a 20-something degree down. But I'm okay. I'm not going to question it. I'm very happy because it cools down. They're saying early fall weather. And I'm like, what? Okay. I'm not, what is that saying about don't look a gift horse in the mouth? It's like an Arctic blast. Why not? Because, of course, being in Florida, mostly, of course, I'm looking at what's churning out there in the Atlantic. And luckily, the last time I think that was Ernesto, it just hooked up. And I think Bermuda was the one that had to worry about that. But that's fine. I'm happy with that. But yeah, one of those things, as far as why I follow the weather, and according to Progressive, I'm a responsible older adult, which could be like contagious to younger ones. I don't know, I'll tell you this much. My adult children, they always call me up for stuff like that. And I say, okay, all right. They must think I know something, kind of. But yeah, that kind of deal. And the thing with the pigeons, that's going good. I gotta show you guys pictures later on of my babies, of my two girls, because I did get them both sexed. They're both females, which, by the way, I found out in pigeon world. Pigeons usually lay 2 eggs, and the norm is male, female, male. There's only like a 5% chance of getting same-sex chicks from a hatch. So I'm going to take that as a good omen. Yeah, as a good omen. Because like I said, these are my foundation pigeons, which hopefully will produce famous racers that will win thousands and thousands of dollars from me and anybody I sell them to. Why not, right? And again, yes, I am doing the Halloween live stream. And yes, I already opened up season 17 of Stories of the Supernatural, which, starts in January of next year, believe it or not, because here we're going down to the home stretch of the year. I'm already getting that ready. So stay tuned for that, etc., 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 as Yul Brynner and the King of Siam would say. So let's get off to the good part. The good part is who is the guest today at Stories of the Supernatural. This is the first time she's here. Her name is Jill Remensnyder. Okay, she has been involved as, I'm not sure if as a director and or producer of 2 Bigfoot documentaries. And she has a YouTube channel entitled A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, and A Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot. I'm going to put a link to her YouTube channel here in the credits of the show. But anyway, they're a documentary where they basically, from what I understand, they're going into the unsolved mysteries regarding Bigfoot or Sasquatch. All right. and everybody knows there's God. There's we've been talking about this. There's different ideas or theories as to what is Bigfoot. Is this an animal? Is this how can I tell you, a primate, that an offshoot of a primate? Some people give it in a very elusive paranormal flavor to it, where yeah, it's for real, but it might also have some type of mystical aspects. And then of course we go into the theories of it being tied into ETs, and even intra, if you want to call intra-dimensional travel or something along those lines, as to why they appear and then disappear. But anyway, we're going to find out more about that. Help me welcome her. How are you doing today, Jill?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Let me ask you, how did you, I'm not going to say how you developed an interest in Bigfoot, because I think a lot of people have, but what led you to do documentaries on that, on it?
So what happened for me? Well, first and foremost, Bigfoot, UFOs, paranormal, that's been a lifelong interest.
Okay.
And when I met Brett Eichenberger, who's the director of the projects, this goes back over 20 years. When we met, one of our the common denominator was, look, I'm
Mm-hmm.
into this other stuff.
Right.
And he's like, me too, what a relief. That was one of the first questions. So do you
Okay.
listen to Coast AM? And when we realized we had all the stuff in common,
Right.
we partnered up. So a Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, and the sequel, Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot, was all kind of born out of when things came to a screeching halt back in 2020.
Okay.
We are, so I'm a producer and a screenwriter. Brett Eichenberger is the director, editor, uh, drone camera guy. Um, and so we kind of balance each other out, and we have a production company. We do video and film production full time.
Okay.
And, we always talked about, like, this was the dream project, like
Okay.
over the years, like, oh, can you imagine what it'd be like to do just push away the corporate stuff and do
Mm-hmm.
like a Bigfoot documentary or UFOs or ghosts. And all of a sudden we had a lot of time on our hands.
Isn't it funny how things happen? But
I,
that's good.
you know, there was some divine choreography in all this.
Yeah.
No joke. It was like an invisible hand kind of had things fall into place. But yeah, in June of 2020, we started production. And originally we were going to explore kind of the three silos, I say silos, of the paranormal world. You have your
Okay.
cryptids, you have your ghosts and hauntings, and then you have all your aerial stuff, the UFOs,
Mm-hmm.
the aliens, abductions. And what we found out was, well, one, I'm just going to say it. I have so much respect for people who do UFO documentaries and who go out pursuing that, because just staring at the sky all night, I just can't stay that focused. But there was something about being in the woods during all
Mm-hmm.
this. And originally, we did an investigation on a cattle mutilation. We investigated a haunted hotel in Eastern Oregon, and we interviewed some people we knew in the Bigfoot community.
Right.
And it was really hard to line up. There was a lot of obstacles. I just don't think
Okay.
it was meant to be. And we kept getting redirected to more people who had Bigfoot experiences. And each person we talked to, they would introduce us to someone. And before we knew it, we were on our way.
Oh, let
So
me tell you, sometimes isn't it unusual? Like you said, you plan and you plan for the downtime, and then, but at least that's great because you thought, okay, now that we're here, what are we going to do with this downtime? We're going to capitalize on it
we're gonna
and
have
go
fun.
in that direction.
We're gonna have fun is what we're gonna do. And it's been,
Yeah.
what's the old quote? If you do what you love, you never
What
work.
was it? Follow, well, I know it's one of these new agey things. Follow your passion, and so I know what you mean. The money will follow, or something. I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, these projects have been a gift. They really
Okay.
have. And I mean that in the way that the people we've met, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the things we've learned, the
Okay.
amount of incredible, like, experiences, stories, education that
Right.
we've been exposed to has really like opened our eyes to other aspects of the paranormal world,
Mm-hmm.
which I should make a little like footnote there. The paranormal is normal, first and
Sure.
foremost.
Sure.
Uh, but as far as understanding and being able to experience all these mysteries
Because
is
from what I've seen,
absolutely.
I think you guys interview like regular people. When I say regular, you know what I'm talking about. People that might not have never told their stories to anybody, or that are unknowns. How's this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fair.
yeah, that they might have had one experience or several, but if it wasn't for you, nobody would ever know who they are or what happened to them. I personally think those are the best stories. You know, when you speak to the person who, let's say they live, I'm going to call it Bigfoot country or whatever the case might be, and they tell you this story, and you're like looking at them, and you're like, this person's telling me the truth. You know, they're not looking. You know, how's this? They're not retelling a story maybe that you've heard 100 times on these different paranormal or Bigfoot shows, and you could
No,
tell.
they're reliving it. They
Yeah.
are
Yes.
reliving it.
Exactly.
And what we've noticed is when, whether it's Bigfoot, whether it's a ghost encounter, whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
UFO sighting, it's almost therapeutic when you can find
Yes.
someone who will listen,
Yes.
who will hold space for you and isn't going to pass a judgment or start questioning.
Yeah. Do that like that. Okay. All right.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. No, it's almost like therapy for a
It's
lot
a
of the people who
catharsis
come
for
to
some people I've spoken to. It's a catharsis because, and I hate to say it, and my audience will know. Sometimes people feel better when they tell. When I say a stranger, somebody that's not a family friend or anybody, like I gotta tell somebody. I'm gonna tell you because you don't know who I am, and you might not be like, oh come on, something like that. And especially, I want to say, especially if it's somebody who doesn't want to lose face, maybe with their family or their friends, depending also what they do for a living, that they're going to be thought of, man, they're going to look at me like I'm weird now if I say, or if they have a reputation of being a no nonsense person and they're like, you had a what experience? Oh, come on. They're still trying to hold on to that persona that they're known by.
hmm
And then they have this story or stories, and it's like, well, you know what? I'm going to tell you. I'm sure. Haven't you ever had an interview start off? Well, I've never told anybody about this.
a lot of them. And some of the best interviews that I wouldn't even call them interviews. I'd say conversations
Right.
are the ones that happen off camera.
Mm-hmm.
Those are always the best stories.
Yeah.
But going to conferences and talking to people, because usually we'll set up a little booth, with our
Mm-hmm.
information, and people will come by and just kind of just like confess. It's like a confessional. Like I want to share, and then you can see them, like it's almost like the mood shifts. They feel lighter because they've
Mm-hmm.
been able to share this with someone who's not gonna call them crazy
Sure.
and whatnot. And yeah, and just to kind of circle back on the comment you made, how some people, they're repeating the same story over and over,
Mm-hmm.
or some people are kind of out looking for their fame and glory and whatnot. We've been really lucky in
Right.
that respect. The people that we've interviewed, I don't want to say that they've all been reluctant,
Right. But they're
witnesses.
like,
For a lot of these people, it's the first time they've gone on camera to talk about it.
yes,
And
yes, yes.
yeah, we've just gotten really lucky in that
I,
respect.
I, I, many years ago, I haven't done it lately. I was a hypnotherapist, and I had a few people come to me with having, because people don't realize it depends on the personality. What having an experience like that does sometimes to people's head, for lack of a better word, their sanity sometimes.
Hmm.
Not because they're going to run around, pulling their hair out, but kind of their reality kind of goes on its side because they never believed maybe that this was real. So, I have had, long for a while, people that had come to me behind the scenes. That's another whole story. Wanting to be hypnotized, not to recover memory, but to bury it, which I couldn't do. As a hypnotist, you really can't do it, despite what people think
Hmm.
about something they had seen, they had witnessed, which wigged them out so badly that they wanted to go, I want to go back to my life before I saw that. All right. They didn't, in other words, and I can't, of course, everywhere you go, there you are. You can't outrun that memory. And like PTSD, the memory is always very fresh. So I had, a few clients, as a matter of fact, that usually came through other people, and that what you were saying about this being real, this was true for them, that they were like, I can't come to grips with this because I don't know how to fit it into my world pre this experience. All right.
Paradigm.
And it depends also on the experience. Some people I know that depends on their, you've heard of, well, Bigfoot's, friendly, or, is, if you want to say, part of nature. There's people that depends on their attitude towards it. But again, it's once you see it with your own eyes, something happens to you in your head, depending on the personality, that you're like, okay, and if that's possible, what else that I think doesn't exist does exist.
And we've heard that from so many people. Yeah. Rich Germeau, who we feature in both documentaries, he comes to mind because he said it in the first documentary. I thought Bigfoot was a fairy tale. Mm-hmm. And, former military, former law enforcement, no one prepared me for this. So what else have I not been told about? Or what else has been kept secret? And you start questioning everything.
Yes.
But one of the things we did in the first documentary is we featured a psychologist who's actually based in Florida. His practice is in Boca Raton. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Michael Adams talked about how the human mind deals with trauma and files things away. And what was really interesting is he talked about there could be a whole subset of people who've had Bigfoot encounters, but it's so repressed, they don't even know that they've had it.
Right. And like I said, it depends on the personality. I mean, I'm sure you've even heard, even with extraterrestrial and abductees, recovered memories. And, you have to be really careful with that. But yeah, I tell everybody, depending on your mind, if something is so stressful that I'm going to say that your mind thinks that your sanity could not take it, you will repress it. And sometimes you never remember. If you're this personality that it's going to forget it. And then sometimes it takes years. That's when I'm sure you've heard of people that will start having weird dreams or flashbacks years later, because it's at that time that your mind thinks you're going to be able to handle this. You're not going to lose your sanity. But some people never get there. But yes, people do repress their memories if it's traumatic enough. All right. And trauma doesn't have to be, everybody thinks of like PTSD as in wartime, or if you see a grisly accident, something like that is traumatic for a normie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And like you said, depending on what kind of encounter you have and what your own understanding, I used to believe that, the universe kind of meets you where you are, and like, we're only going to give you as much as you can handle. Well,
no,
I have to rethink that one. But yeah, we've talked to people who've had these amazing, friendly encounters. They're just absolutely beautiful. We've had people who've had encounters where it scared them to death, even though Bigfoot wasn't necessarily doing anything threatening, but because all of a sudden you realize there's like a 9-foot apex predator in the forest, and you and your gun out hunting are not going to be able to do anything. And then, of course, the people who just have that fleeting sighting, like one running across the road or through the woods, or just,
right. Just something that in your mind, you try to think, no, that wasn't a bear. No, that wasn't that. That wasn't that. That wasn't that. And you're like, oh, crap. You yourself, you can't lie to yourself. You come to the conclusion, God, was that and a few years ago, I interviewed this gentleman. He's already passed away, Jim Smith. He used to run the Alabama Bigfoot Society since the 70s. And he would tell me he lived out like in a part of Alabama, it was very rural. And he said that the people would have these sightings of Bigfoot going along these country roads. And they would call the police. What are the police going to do? They'd be like, okay. So he says that sometimes the cops would bring the people over to his house and they go, hey, Jim, we got somebody for you. And he told me, Marlene, he goes, I don't know what these people saw. He goes, but whatever they saw, they believed it. And he said he had a few that would say, "Sir, do you mind if we stay at your house till like daybreak?" Like they were afraid to get back on the road and have another encounter. And like you said, it wasn't because Bigfoot attacked them. It was just that it was like, oh my God. But that thing crossing the road or by the road. And I mean, he had a bunch of stories along those lines where he says, you could tell these people were not lying. And they were scared. They were really scared of whatever it was that they saw. And he said, and of course, like most people, when they call the police is like, what do you want us to do? Run after Bigfoot in the bush? No, we can't do that. And yeah, like those stories, there's a lot of them like that.
Yeah. Resources are limited. The police
Yeah.
can't run after every Bigfoot call. So
No, of course it's not, and sometimes, you know what? I'm not going to say a lot of people will see things that they think is Bigfoot. It's not Bigfoot. I'm not going to say there's no mistaken identity. I'm sure there is.
of course, yeah.
But okay, when you take those out of the way, you're still left with a lot of people seeing something directly or indirectly that it's like, okay, what's out there? And I've also heard, and I don't know if you've interviewed anybody that's done these recordings of what is supposed to be Bigfoot chatters. And one time I spoke to Ron Moorhead, who's got, the only camping I've ever done has been like in a campground with like one of these guards. I mean, I've never done this deep in the woods campground, but I thought if I was out there and I heard this, I'd be like going to sleep in my truck or my car and booking it out of there in the morning. You could tell this was like, I can't think of any animal that would make these type of calls.
That audio, the Sierra sounds unbelievable. And
Uh-huh.
Brett and Mike Ferry, our
Yeah.
cinematographer, and we went out to visit the Omaha Reservation in
Okay.
Nebraska. And we were waiting to go out that evening. We were around a fire, and not too far off in the distance, we could hear. It sounded like monkeys getting excited.
Yes.
That's the only
Yeah.
thing I can compare it to. And we all looked at each other, and the gentleman who was hosting us said, "Oh, they know we're coming out."
Yeah.
And that night we were bluff charged. That's a whole other story.
Really?
But yeah, the Sierra Sounds, we're actually currently working on a documentary based on
Okay.
Ron Moorhead's recordings
Okay.
in the Sierra Nevada, and
Let me tell you something. That alone, I'd be what in the, and I'm not, by the way, I'm not an outdoors woman, outdoorsman, whatever you want, where, these people will tell you, I know what all these weird calls are this animal will make if it's mating. I'm not that type of person. But I think I know enough that you could tell this is not like a wolf or a coyote or a buck or, especially at night. All right. Because you think, okay, there's certain animals that will come out at night that make these weird calls. And when you hear that, it's like you said, it sounds like monkeys chattering, except it's in the Northwest somewhere. I mean, it's like, but
well,
yeah.
what surprised us is that, okay, so I'm a native Oregonian,
Okay.
and so's the rest of our film crew, and we just kind of assumed foolishly that Bigfoot was only in the Pacific Northwest and up into like British Columbia. We thought it was kind of an isolated thing. Oh no, we did not realize Oklahoma,
Yes.
Texas, New England,
Yeah.
Ohio, the Midwest, yeah, and Florida, of course, with the
Yeah. The
skunk
skunk
ape.
ape.
We had no idea. So they're everywhere, and with the audio that Ron recorded up
Mm-hmm.
up in California, we consider that sort of the gold bar. That's like the gold standard of the audio to support the evidence of
Yes.
Bigfoot. And so we have that, but then also there's a bunch of other things that kind of come with. I might be jumping the gun, so just tell me to slow
Right.
down if I'm
I
getting ahead
know.
of
Go
myself.
ahead.
But so it's like we have the footprints, we have the tree breaks and whatnot. We have
Mm-hmm.
we have the audio. A lot of times during the interviews, we'd reach a certain point and people would look at us and ask, Do you want me to tell you the weird stuff?
And it'd be like, absolutely.
It's like, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Or worse, we would get done filming, be packing up the cameras, and
Uh-huh.
then, oh yeah, there's this other thing I forgot to mention. So what we've found in doing all these interviews is there seems to be, more often than not, what you could say is a paranormal connection.
Yes.
People are reporting seeing orbs or UFOs.
Yes.
Before, during, after their sighting, they're experiencing the telepathy, the mind
Mm-hmm.
speak. Uh, they're witnessing aports and things appearing out of nowhere, disappearing. Also,
Mm-hmm.
haunting activity as well.
Yes. Yes.
One of the witnesses we interviewed, Daryl Adams, he
Mm-hmm.
had a property in Central Oregon, Central Southern Oregon, that he and Tobe Johnson made it their habituation and research spot, and
Okay.
it was like a mini Skinwalker Ranch.
Okay. I was gonna go there because yes.
They had a little bit of everything,
Mm-hmm.
UFO sightings on a pretty regular basis. And it just wasn't them. Everyone in this area was experiencing this. Daryl was having the Bigfoot come down to his property, interacting, leaving things. One of the reports that we get that always, I have to scratch my head is things appearing in places where they shouldn't.
Yeah.
A lot of times, Daryl will go out to his truck and it's locked, and there'll be like a white feather laying on the console. Or my favorite is when they lived at the property in Oregon. One day they came back from church, and in the middle of their living room, there's this good sized rock. I don't know where it came from. Neither do
Like what?
they.
How did this happen? Right.
Yeah, it's almost like kind of a show of force, like, oh yeah, we don't need a key. We can get in on
Yes.
our own. But
Yes.
all sorts of things like that. So in the sequel, Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot, we brought in scientists, and
Okay.
we're like, how do we explain this? What's going on? And to make a long scientific story short, it all comes down to quantum physics. It comes down
Mm-hmm.
to science we don't understand,
Sure.
and a lot of stuff that I am not well versed in speaking on.
Right. Right. And some of these things you hear, I mean, I've heard of, of course, interdimensional travel, whether you want to call them portals or rips. You know, can they come through a portal, or are they coming in through a rip? Like, hey, it opens up and they, scoot over. Is there pockets where they can go into interdimensional pockets, where like where you could hide in this little pocket and then come out. Or I think also that they're masters of camouflage, and yet they could be right in front of you and you just don't see them because they have the ability to stand or totally still. Because usually our human eye, especially if you're out in the woods, you usually you'll catch something when it moves. But if some,
Mhm.
and the reason I know is because I have farm animals, and some of these like birds, like game birds, they'll just be like, you can't, especially with the feathering, you can't see them because they'll be like, they freeze. You can't see them. And I think they have that ability where they can freeze and you just, you pass over them and you don't see them. And I'm sure you've even heard that there's a version of, you remember from the movie Predator, the original one,
Yes.
where it has like a blending camouflage kind of ability.
Yes. Yes.
And it was like, okay, why not? It's anything is possible as to what we're dealing with. And like you said, when you mentioned, in the Skinwalker thing, that they had what they call that hitchhiker effect, where people, not that they necessarily even had to be at the site, they were going home and weird stuff started happening at their houses,
Yes.
which is like, okay, how does that work? Even people that weren't, like they said, like people that were like running around doing security and that weren't really engaged in the research in and of itself, started experiencing things. When, by the way, some of it was kind of like weird, disturbing kind of stuff, like seeing some very unusual things. But that again, it makes you think there's more to them than just a lost creature that nobody's been able to find. There's like you said, some type of physics or something we don't understand.
Yeah, and we've we've heard, a lot of theories, and I come from the school of thought where until we know in
Yes.
absolutes, all theories are valid, everything's on the table, until we can, use scientific method to eliminate and say without a doubt it's X,
Yes.
Y, and Z, not A through W.
Yes.
So, and just like how some people say different regions have different temperaments and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like people. Some are happy, some are friendly, some are
Yes.
grumpy, some are violent, and I also think that has to do with the paranormal abilities,
Yes.
so to speak. We've been told by people who do communicate with them that some choose to live a more organic 3D life,
Okay.
whereas others, because they have family units, and if the families kind of pass down those
Mm-hmm.
abilities and make sure their children know about it, their
Right.
Sasquatch
Yes.
children, um,
Mm-hmm.
that determines what you're dealing with. But something very interesting, just kind of again leapfrogging a little bit in the sequel, we interviewed Eric Bard,
Okay.
who is the lead scientist at Skinwalker Ranch, and we had
Mm-hmm.
him review some footage that was filmed by Barb Shoup, who is an
Okay.
experiencer and a researcher, and it's of a cloaked Bigfoot. And what's really interesting about that also is what she caught on camera, this kind of predator pixelated type thing. That isn't what she saw with her naked eye. What she saw was a black kind of hairy creature with a conical head that took off
Okay.
running. And what the camera caught was something like bending and reflecting light
Right. Okay.
in that predator shimmery type of way.
Yeah.
And he brought up a really good point, that perhaps what we know as and what we see with our eyes as Bigfoot is almost kind of like an avatar
Sure.
for something else.
Let me tell you something. That's a deep rabbit hole, but very possible. Very possible. As a matter of fact, and also when you said, and I wonder if anything, I was speaking to a gentleman. He's here from Florida and he does Bigfoot research. And I was talking to him and he's telling me how, I want to say it was recent. I don't think it was too, he went in out here and he said it was with his wife and his two ladies. And he said that he had kind of that charging thing. And he says, he goes, I'm an outdoorsman. I'm a hunter. I'm used to being out in the woods. And he says that I had this feeling like I needed to, like I was stepping on somebody's toes. Somebody wanted me out of there. I'm looking at my wife and the other ladies, and they're like, nothing's happening. And we were talking about how much of this is it a male against male thing, like a testosterone thing going on,
Good
whether
point.
they're in mating season or territory. It's like I don't care about the women, but you're a man or male, and I do have a problem with you. And he was like telling them, like, all right, you want to spend the night out here? He said he felt really uncomfortable being out there. And he says, and I could feel it, whatever was there was watching us. But they didn't feel any type of menace or like, a stink eye kind of thing, like, we want you out of here. It was just me. And we talked about that. He thinks that a lot of times these occurrences where people will say, hey, I feel like we need to get out of there, or that bluff charge, it might be a male against male scenario. Maybe you happen to stop by there when mating season's going on, or there's a female close by. I mean, we don't really know, you know, are they solitary like bears that get together mate, or do they travel around in pods or family units? Or hey, let me tell you something. I want to say in nature, that's one of the most powerful things is the mating call. Let's face it, you know. So maybe that's part of the thing of why they, in other words, they don't care if you're not the same species. You're close enough. I mean, why not?
Hey,
I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, it's a possibility, but that thing that you were saying as far as that what we're seeing versus what's there might be a totally different thing. Yeah, think about that. That oh man, that's a lot of people would be like, what?
That open boy, that goes from the friendly like little bunny slope jump into a hole like
Yes, yes.
way down the rabbit hole
But
because
you know, there's a lot of people that would resist that idea because they're very hung up on this image that we have of Bigfoot.
mhm.
Whether, especially the people that are more friendly towards it, I guess is what I'm saying, as in know their nature, and all of a sudden you find out that maybe what you thought was the hairy, apish kind of lost primate deal is not exactly that. Wow.
Yeah, and then you get into, I mean, we touch on it slightly in the sequel, but then you get into religion
Mm-hmm.
and the implications of, okay, let's identify what Bigfoot, Sasquatch is, and what does that mean to our history?
Sure.
And the DNA, there have been DNA studies and whatnot, and it throws a wrench into what we've been taught all these years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there's also, you get into the whole idea of the extraterrestrial
Of
connection,
course. Of
like
course.
and we've heard multiple theories and ideas behind all this. Some people believe there's also, I don't know if race is the right word, a group.
Right. Right. It's a species. It's like
I
you don't
don't
know
know
what
the
to call them.
classification, but
Yeah.
there's also like bioengineering going
Yeah.
on,
Sure. Were they
from
tweaked? Were
ETs.
they or were they totally
Retweaked.
retweaked or were they invented? How's that? Why not? Right now, I mean, look what we can do with a CRISPR, but which
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know,
You
were they are they off planet and were brought here and let's throw them and see what happens. Let's put them in the wilds. But then you hear of these stories from what I understand from indigenous tribes, Native Americans that have talked about something that sounds like a Bigfoot or Sasquatch
Yeah, it's a part of
way
their history.
before.
Yeah, and we've talked to enough tribal members
Mm-hmm.
nationwide. Everyone has their own history
Right.
and stories of the Sasquatch, the forest people.
Right.
And we're getting ready to explore that further, um, in our next installment of A Flash of Beauty. Um,
I
because
tell everybody when and you hear this and it's like it's really funny because uh Native Americans, they would have sometimes these stories, that mountain, don't go to that mountain, that forest, that river because it's haunted or bad or whatever. Or like leave it alone, don't go there. That's the bad place, don't go there. And I think that's how they coexisted in a place where whatever was there is like it's not if we ignore it, it doesn't hurt us. But then people like us after we're like, oh, that mountain where you're not supposed to go, let's go there. What are you doing? Yeah, exactly. Let's
right,
let's find out what that's about. And I think the Native Americans are going, all right. Case in point, like Skinwalker Ranch, as you know, that had the name of it was because supposedly this was where the Skinwalkers, according to Navajo tradition, and all. In other words, that it was a place like, man, stay away from that place. The Ute tribes and everybody around there was like, go
and
around,
everyone
take the long road, but don't go
right,
through there. All
yeah.
right, and and we've had people going out there now trying to study it for what the last seriously for like the last 30 years. But I I still like and getting back to what you were talking about genetics that I know I can't remember that. I think I don't know if you've heard of him. I think he's an English geneticist that he said I will be willing to test any genetic material that somebody will send me. Like in other words, he says I don't believe in Bigfoot, but I'm not willing to just discount it, and I'm willing to test any samples. Let's say somebody finds in, let's say, the Northwest. I saw him a couple of times, and then he faded. And at this point, and I don't want to be a cynic, but I wonder that if anybody ever did find any hair or anything, if it wasn't contaminated, if they would actually fess up and say the truth. What do you think?
I think people have tried to tell the truth, and I don't think the masses are ready
Yeah.
for that. And again, I'm not well enough versed on all
Mm-hmm.
the results on all the DNA testing that are still
Right.
ongoing. People are still
Right.
sending in hair samples and whatnot.
Right.
But what they're finding is, oh gosh, how do we do this? It's a common mother, but the father is, it doesn't line up with normal DNA.
Right. There's something in the chromosome.
I'm
And I know
terrible
DNA
about,
has made a lot of advances as far as that they get down to the smallest denominator as far as tracing.
yeah, and it gets into this gets into like in Ron Moorhead's book, The Quantum Bigfoot, where he
Mm-hmm.
talks about gene manipulation, DNA manipulation
Yes.
from off-planet uh, extraterrestrials,
Mm-hmm.
and but with us, and that the Sasquatch are the original people, citizens who've been here the longest, and we're
Right.
the ones that have been tinkered with. And
Yeah.
that's a whole other show. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
Yeah. Yes. Of course. Like who was here first? Like, yeah. And that, maybe we were the ones that were dropped off. And it's like, hey, let's drop off these human things and let's see what happens with them.
But
You never
I'll tell
know.
you something funny about the hair that people collect.
Uh-huh.
Mel Scahan talks about, there's consequences, if you take the hair from any of these sites and like keep them as trophies and whatnot. And on our website, on our YouTube channel, Mel
Mm-hmm.
Scahan has his full interview is up, and he goes into
Okay.
great detail about what happened to him and his experience after he collected some hair.
What happened?
But, well, sometimes when you take things that don't belong to you, the original owner will come back looking for them in very dramatic fashion. I will
Oh,
leave it at that because it's my one of my favorite stories that we've heard as far as
okay.
experiences, and I would not do it justice trying to do the
That
Richard
I've
Digest
never heard of
version.
that, but that is very interesting because yes, that there's some you even hear these stories. I'm sure there's a couple of ghost towns out west where they say that people take maybe even a stone or some little artifact and then they start sending the stuff back because they say a bunch of bad things happened after they took it. And I'll have park rangers say, "Yeah, we all the time we get people sending stuff back to us saying, "Hey, after I took whatever." And it says it doesn't have to be anything valuable per se. Oh
But
my
isn't
god,
it just it's a
Bodie,
general,
Bodie is one of them. Yeah, Bodie's one
yeah,
of
it's
them.
a general like the law, one of these laws of nature is if you're gonna take something, leave something,
Yeah, it's an
you know.
exchange.
There
It's an
has to be an
exchange.
exchange. Well, Daryl Adams had collected some Sasquatch hair, uh,
Mm-hmm.
what he believes is, and I do too, based on some weird happenings that started happening in our house. But we were given the hair. It was sealed up in an envelope. We opened it.
Okay.
I remember at one point we opened it to get a good look at it. We took it out carefully with tweezers and we filmed it with macro lens. Uh,
Okay.
for the sequel because we
Okay.
Daryl's talking about the hair and we wanted to show like this is what it looks like close up. And we put it back in the envelope, resealed it, tucked it away in a safe place. Now, like at the same time, Tobe Johnson, who we feature in both documentaries, he has a glass vial that has a hair in it as well that he'll
Okay.
take and he'll show it to people like, well, we think this is Sasquatch hair. So fast forward, we're all going about our lives. We had someone in our house that was kind of like, "Oh, come on, you don't really believe this, right?"
Right.
And
Right.
we're like, "No, we have a hair." And they're kind of laughing, like, "Okay, let me see this." We open the envelope; it's not there. We're
Oh.
freaking out because we're like, "Did we lose it? Did we lose our Sasquatch hair?"
Right. No.
And
No.
so we're looking in the seams of the envelope. We got a
Yeah.
high-powered flashlight looking, and we're just like, that's so weird. And then, it's kind of, set it aside. Around that same time, like a day or two later, we mentioned it to Tobe. And Tobe just kind of looked at us and said, the hair in my glass vial went missing recently.
Whoa.
And it only it didn't reappeared later.
So in
And
other words, it's like
We
Uh-huh.
went back and it was in the envelope.
What?
There, plain as day. Yeah.
Oh man.
I
You
mean,
must have you I'm sure. Thank God, if that happens when you're by yourself, you can say, I'm losing it. But you where there was more than one person involved in this,
mhm.
where you're thinking you didn't see it and I didn't see it. And now it's back.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've had other like strange circumstances, weird synchronicities happen as well.
Right.
Um, the occasional orb floating through the
Okay.
house and whatnot, and this kind of weird sounds and things, certain appliances and electronics having a
Really.
mind of their own
Yes.
during certain
Yes.
conversations. So,
Really. Like the timing is like that's perfect timing.
yeah,
Like if you uh-huh. Because
yeah,
you hear about that even from the paranormal, whether it's Bigfoot or anything. I call it the paranormal umbrella, but electronics sometimes, I'm not going to say sometimes electronics will act up. It has nothing to do with the paranormal, but sometimes the timing on it, like you said, when certain conversations, I mean, I've had shows that I call it paranormal sabotage because stuff that's worked perfectly all of a sudden goes, "Ooh," and it's because either a certain guest or a certain topic comes up. And after a while, you realize, okay, oh, it's that topic. Okay. You know, somebody doesn't want, but I understand perfectly what you're saying as far as, and I don't know why electronics are so, I don't know, why
I
it's,
think
it's
it's
sensitive.
the electromagnetics, and I think the same thing that ghost hunters experience. With
Mm-hmm.
batteries draining and like glitches and whatnot.
Yes.
Bigfoot researchers are getting that out in the field too, and the same thing with people like investigating like crop circles and
Yes.
everything. We've had that where we've gone out into the woods and all of a sudden, oh, all of our batteries are dead.
That
Okay.
gentleman that I was talking about, Tim Turner, out here in Florida, he's gone out to some places where, in Skinwalker Ranch, they get that 1.6 megahertz reading
Yeah.
whenever there's going to be he says I'm in the middle of nowhere, and he understands, and I'll start getting that 1.6 megahertz reading, and and anomalous stuff happens, and then we could go into like, are we talking about, is this the how can I tell you, the announcement of a portal opening? Is that what like, what is it? Is that something that we can't see, but or our eyes can't see it, but that's basically the, and then I tell everybody, because I've done paranormal research since the 90s, and I've been at places, my experience, when something really truly is going to happen, you will feel it announce itself where you're at. There's, I don't know how to describe it, and I'm not talking about equipment, because everybody's now got all these gadgets, but
Yeah.
if you really know how to, your body is like the best instrument in my,
The
and I say most of these things
temperature,
will
that
announce
ultra
themselves. They
change.
will announce
Yeah,
themselves. All right.
absolutely.
There's a shift that maybe it's a compendium of things, and maybe that 1.6 megahertz or other things are, it's like, this is the announcement that something is either coming through, opening, leaving. The electronic, I think, also is a sign of, I don't know, I don't want to say if it's either on purpose or just so happens because something's around, or if it's using that energy, is it sucking that energy and using that energy to manifest. Yeah. It's a hard,
Possibly.
well, that's just always the theory. I mean, there's a sabotage version, which I say, which it's on purpose. They don't want you to talk about something, or maybe it's just using that juice to manifest, into this dimension. If we want, we're going to go into the interdimensional. Maybe being in this dimension is, how's this, is heavier. I don't know. I'm sure there's supposed to be physicists going. What is she talking about? But that
Well, it's
maybe
a denser, yeah. No,
denser,
makes sense.
heavier.
Yeah.
Um, that maybe to even be here a little bit just pulls. You need to pull something, depending, I guess, on what you're made up of, whatever. But yeah, that's so across the board. ETs, UFOs, paranormal, cryptids.
And
There's
if I can recommend a book, Dr.
yes.
Simeon Hine has a book called Dark Matter Monsters. And
Oh,
he gets into the physics and the science
uh
that
huh.
explains some of these paranormal abilities, a
I'm gonna
Bigfoot.
write this down.
Um, and it applies to what people experience with ghosts, what people experience
Mm-hmm.
with UFOs, crop circles. Just, and
Yes.
it's a really easy read. That's the other thing. He made it very user friendly, so it's not like
That you'd be like,
about he's talking about like MIT type,
yeah, yeah, like,
quizzes.
all right, okay.
And I'm like, oh, this makes sense. So
Yes.
I recommend it to everyone.
Let me tell you something. The and talking we're gonna go, I'm sure you've heard of the CERN colliders and other colliders that are out there,
Yes.
because there's other stuff besides the one in Switzerland. That sometimes I think that's what worries people, that they're gonna do something with dark matter or a hole or a wormhole or something. And it makes you wonder if this is really what's behind all of this stuff, as far as the dark matter and wormholes, and or something that we can't comprehend, or that doesn't belong here. How's this?
Or
You
what's
know,
already going on, what has already happened that
yes,
we just don't know yet, or we're
of
not
course.
aware of. Because we're
I know.
so
It's like I've.
we're looking at our phones, we're
Oh no, this.
on
It's
the
like
computer.
no. I'm. Oh no. Let me tell you something. I tell everybody. Once upon I was kind of like one of these, like, I've never been like a conspiracy theorist cynic kind of person. Like, oh, I think until the last few years, but now all of a sudden it's like, is my phone listening to me? That kind of, not that there's anything interesting, because I don't talk about anything interesting, but still, it's like after a while you're like, huh, you know, or it got to the point I laugh because people don't want to admit to it, but I have one of these cameras that I hang off my monitor, and I finally got one of these little swivel things that you could put over the top of it, the camera, and I was like, just in case,
Better
just in
safe than
case.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I think, because when you live long enough, I think technology has sped up so quickly that I agree with you. I think that we're just given the tip of the iceberg of what's been engineered, discovered, used, developed. But I think that there's a lot more out there, as far as, and of course we get into the area of the UFOs. Everybody thinks UFO, extraterrestrial. How much of these UFOs are not extraterrestrial? They're terrestrial, as in our stuff. Just that people are not used to seeing the silhouette, man-made, of something that you see going over your town or wherever, and everybody's thinking, "Oh, it's ET," and no, it's not ET. It could be here. You know, Earth origin. You know, we just have never been privy to who that we've gone that far. You know,
And
and
most
then,
people, I don't, I think most people, it just wouldn't really impact their day-to-day
oh
lives.
no, of course not.
So, I mean, at first, and Diane Stocking says this in A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. What would happen if
Mm-hmm.
if the big discovery was made? How would it change things? And she's like, unfortunately, I think everyone would be really excited at first, but the majority of people, it would not impact their lives. They just go about their business.
Right.
Um, and I also, I mean, if you look at the way disclosure for UFOs, UAPs, whatnot
Mm-hmm.
has been, the way they've been rolling that out, like 10, 15 years ago, if on national news they had put out like these
Yeah.
tic tac videos and whatnot, I think people would lose their mind. But
Yeah.
nowadays it's like, yeah, the military government, they know about it. Meh,
Yeah.
what else is on TV?
Right. Like, oh, yeah, for sure. Well, it could be one of two things. It could be like you said, people are like, hey, no, man, yeah, hey, that's so and so. It's coming on Netflix. Okay, yeah, there's an okay. Well, either that, or people don't believe it. They're kind of like, when Orson Welles did that pretend, UFO, I mean, extraterrestrial invasion, that people are running around like basically lost it. We're a whole totally different type of people from them, from the people that lived back then, that really believed that they were getting invaded. Now, like you said, most people would be like, and then there's, you know, I think that we've been conditioned by Hollywood, the movies we've seen, from whether it's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I want to say that's one of the earliest ones that I can remember that really looked at it.
Probably
Um,
the best one, actually.
yeah,
And that
yeah, yeah.
applies to Bigfoot too. Uh,
Yes.
just the whole, just what those witnesses went through, and
Yes.
how they couldn't get, it shifted their paradigm so much. Look at how it impacted their lives. They had to have answers,
Yes.
you know.
Yes. And then the other day I've been watching the X-Files. I hadn't seen the X-Files in a really long time. All right. After a while, when you see it on a weekly basis, which was many years ago, but when you see it close together and you see the storyline about the ETs and the agenda and everything, I was like, no wonder so many people believe this. Look at what these people are coming up with, which is, behind the scenes collusion with ETs. But then at the same time, I was like, wow, this is great. And I'm thinking how much of that has seeped into our collective subconscious that, like you said, either we kind of partially believe it or we wouldn't be that surprised. Like, what they started having hearings a couple of years ago that people are like, meh. All right, okay.
I mean,
And
I remember being a kid and that TV show V came out,
yes, yes.
and they were like ripping off their faces, and they were
The
reptilians
the
and
lizard people, yeah.
eating mice and whatnot. And I thought, well, this is odd. Why would, how creative, I get. Like as a kid, I was like,
Yes.
oh, this isn't like Star Trek or Star Wars. This
Mm-hmm.
feels very tied into what life would be like on Earth if this happened. Um, and now you hear, I mean, you hear,
Well, they I was reading this article. God, I can't Marlene right now. Remember, they were saying, everybody always thinks of an invasion from ET. Let's say we're talking here, aggressive or takeover kind of scenario where you think they're gonna come and they're gonna. He says all they have to do is, since we're always going out there and we're putting out, all they have to do is send us a message and go, hey, open this up and we will send you the cure for cancer. Like just down, we're giving you these 100 um, 100 book medical solutions, and they all we have to do is download it just like a virus, and it could take down everything. They go, ET doesn't have to come in with a bunch of ships. All they have to do is send us the equivalent of a virus. They say they could do the same thing, as far as disabling us, that they really don't need like all these armies to come and take us down. Because remember, we're going out there going, hey, hey, you know,
I think
hello.
they're already here. I think
Yeah.
they're already here, and
Yes.
they're comfortable. And I
Do
mean,
you think that they're ETs or do you think they're hybrids?
uh, maybe both.
Okay.
Maybe that, again, that's a whole other rabbit hole that
Yeah. Yeah. Because you'll get
I know
people that
just
will.
enough to be dangerous about. So
Right. And, you get these things where they've been trying to hybridize us but only the ones that were like very, very human like. In other words, that could pass off as true humans are let go into the population. Like there's different variants. Some of it's like, no, you can't go to Earth, man, or we can't let you loose. They'll know right away. You're an ET. No, you. Oh no, you. We got the right mix with you. You could pass off as a regular human,
a
and those are
couple
the
of
ones
years
that they let
ago
go.
at the McMinnville UFO festival,
Uh
it's like,
huh.
it's amazing. If you ever have a chance to get out to McMinnville, Oregon, it's usually in
Okay.
May. But huge parade. They bring in, all these famous speakers and whatnot. And a woman came up to me. I was kind of like, oh, wow, this is all so cool and fun. And a woman came up to me and just said, they're here. They come to these events where they can blend in and kind of like take it all in. They just get a kick out of this. And then she proceeded to tell him, I was there. I had a booth for Bigfoot stuff.
Right.
But then she just proceeded to talk about how going up and down Interstate 5, like through Oregon, California, Oregon, up into Washington, is almost like an express lane for
Really.
UFOs. And she's like, oh yeah, they're traveling up and down all the time. And sometimes when you see the fighter jet scrambling, usually
Uh
like
huh.
once a week, they'll just kind of be out doing their weekly, their cruise. And she's like, yeah, but sometimes when there's a lot more activity and they're moving
Uh
in
huh.
areas that they shouldn't
Yes.
be, it's usually because there are sightings going on. And it's funny because at the
Yes.
beginning of our documentary, when we started this, we investigated a cattle mutilation in
Mm-hmm.
eastern, like southeast Oregon.
Okay.
And we at the end we were asking the rancher and the ranch hand, we're like, well, what do you think, what do you think happened? Who could have done this?
Okay.
And they were convinced it was Satanists who went out there. And I'm like, no Satanist is driving their car like 10 extra miles off this dirt
Let
road.
me ask something. Was it the mutilations that you usually hear about, like that surgical precision kind of deal? Is that how they
Surgical
mutilated?
precision, no blood. The
Okay.
farmhand, when he was handling the cow, he got violently ill for a couple days.
Really? See,
Yeah.
that I think is so interesting.
And none of the animals would ever go around it.
Yes.
And there's a lot of birds of prey and like
Mm-hmm.
coyotes and stuff. They wouldn't touch it because they're saying usually if an animal goes down, it is cleaned up
Oh
really
yes,
fast.
yes.
But no one would touch it. It just kind of
Yeah,
sat there.
everybody gives it. All the predators, all the scavengers, nobody touches it. It's like, well,
Here's the thing: is they told us after they gave us their theories on why it would be Satanists, because who
mm-hmm.
else would do it? They started talking about, they're like, in this little valley, we're always seeing like weird lights in the sky and stuff, and the military is always flying through here and whatnot.
Well, just so happened, I spoke to a gentleman. His name is Dr. Rapuano. And we were talking about he has a book out about ET encounters. He's who works a lot with the brain. He's brain, and that's his specialty and everything. And I got into the subject is like, how many cows are they going to kill? And we were talking. He tells me that bovine brains is like one of the best materials for research. I was like, what? I never knew that because I was thinking like, how many cows are you going to kill? Just what? To study them what? And he's telling me how the bovine brain material is used in research because I guess whether it is to grow whatever it is that you're trying to grow or develop, this is like the perfect. I guess I'm gonna say nutrient. I'm not sure if that, but it's like the perfect template for
Hmm.
using it. And I was like, well, now that changes it. If bovine brain, cow brain, is can be used in the lab to grow whatever it is that you're trying to grow. Now, maybe that I don't know why they would take the udders and all the other stuff and the all the stuff that you hear about, but as far as the brain, that was like I go, well, and maybe they're using the blood for something else. I'd never heard of that. So because again, the mutilations they're almost the same no matter what part of the country you're at. Same thing. And I've even heard some ranchers like down in Texas and all these areas. This is at this point, they're so not that they're used to it, but they're like, this is the cost of doing business. That they know that they're going to lose X amount
Wow.
of cattle, and that they've even had researchers say, and they're like, we can't figure it out. Same thing, predators, scavengers, give it a wide berth, do not get near it. I know in some cases they've taken tissue samples to see is it diseased? No, it didn't die because it was sick. There was one in Marlene, I want to say was it Missouri, where they did take some tissue samples and they found barbiturates in it, and I was like, okay, barbiturates. I mean, are they drugging these animals? I'm not talking about Satanists. I'm talking about maybe ETs. I mean, like,
Yeah.
are they drugging them? And is it they're not finding barbiturates because they're not testing for it? Are they just testing for whatever makes a cow sick, or some type of disease, but they're not really testing it for drugs? I don't know, but
Yeah,
this
that's
it's
an
too weird.
interesting point. One of the things that really stood out that you hear that, like, oh, there was no blood. The farmhand, he was also like, he was a butcher, or he took butchery classes, for,
Okay.
and he's like, you don't understand how much blood is in an adult cow. He's like, this
Oh,
whole area should have been saturated
right.
based on the incisions and whatnot and cuts on it. He's like, there was not a drop.
And that's, I think that it's almost like that you would think, I mean, is it that they're draining it there or is it being killed somewhere else and then it's being brought over there? I mean, it's like, how does that work?
I have no idea. I can,
And it's like, I
no,
mean,
I
we could
can
get into
barely
more.
wrap my head around these, cryptids walking
I know.
amongst us.
Right. And I hate to say it, but when you look at the cattle mutilations, it gives it a sinister kind of like feeling because
Yeah.
nobody wants to think like, what are you doing to an animal and why are you insanguinating it? And what are you doing with the udders and the tongue and the brain? Like, that's kind of like what? And as a matter of fact, butchers will say that what's taken is of the whole animal, that's the most expendable. That's the least expensive part that a lot of butchers, they sell for nothing or just throw it away. They take the udder, the anus, the all these parts that are like in other words, it's not like hey, they want to have a steak for dinner or something.
Maybe it's a
They're
courtesy. It's a courtesy that they are only taking what they view as the less desirable parts.
yes, well, yeah, we could look at it that way, unless they're growing. I mean, we could, that's a whole. Maybe they've got this lab where they're using all these parts of the cow to grow. Who God knows. Yeah. I mean, and again, we always come down to even with whether it's Bigfoot, that question: Are they friendly? Are they unfriendly? Or are they just indifferent? And everybody has their own version of how do they, whether it's even Bigfoot. I'm sure you've heard of people that think of Bigfoot like, yeah, you gotta be careful with Bigfoot because you know all those people disappearing in national parks, they were done in by a Bigfoot.
We've heard that too.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and I think that's a valid point.
yeah. I think that you know
I
I,
might
I
know more
think
than I'm letting on, but
well no
I'll
you
save
know
that for
what
another documentary.
well you know what you've like you were saying, how different parts of the country have their version of or even the different name for like a Bigfoot Sasquatch type creature. You'll hear some of them are friendlier and then there's others that are known to be like very aggressive, right? um and maybe I tell everybody, when an animal, depending, gets old and or sick, it will usually go after prey that it normally wouldn't because it's hungry. It needs to eat. All right. That might account for it also. It's like, ah, man, that I
That's a
normally don't
great
go for
point.
humans, but I'm hungry. And anything as big as a Bigfoot has must have a very high caloric intake. It has to have. If it's that big, and I'm sorry, berries are not gonna cut it. All right.
No, they're following the deer migration. They're
Yes.
following the salmon runs.
Yes.
Um, and there's reports of them in like suburban areas getting into trash cans, almost like
Yes. And that's the thing that I'm
problem
thinking about.
animals. But when you're hungry, you're gonna
Yeah.
look for the path of least resistance. So
Well, people don't think, you could be Bigfoot and maybe you could take a fall and sprain your ankle. That's just me. But it happens. Animals, it happens to animals. Out in the wild, you'll find deers, their antlers become entangled. They found like, carcasses or things where they found fell in a hole. Because everybody thinks that animals are so knowledgeable in the wild that nothing like that ever happens to them. I think that Bigfoot could suffer an accident. And before, maybe he could run after that deer, but not anymore. So I guess I'm just going to go through so and so's trash can or that guy that comes out here by himself that's up in that blind. And I'm really hungry.
he's looking like a good
He's like,
snack.
yeah. Yeah, it's like, yeah. I think that there's always a possibility. I mean, like poor Bigfoot, he must be like. But yeah, I have you had any of the people that you've interviewed that have come across or cited something like a dog man?
Yes, we have. Let me rack my brain here. I do know that, let's see here, Jeff Rohn, who we feature in the first documentary, he's had a dogman encounter.
Okay.
uh, not too far from, I think, where he is having Bigfoot activity. Um, Let me think this, because we've talked to a lot of people. We have. I mean, we have talked to a lot of people who have had dogman encounters or what they suspect were.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Harold and Cody, who we feature as the very last story in A Flash of
Okay.
Beauty Paranormal Bigfoot, after we filmed their interview, a few days later, Harold called us and said that there was a forestry person,
Mm-hmm.
doing, marking trees, timber cruiser, and
Okay.
she came up on something that was about 8 or 9 feet tall. It was turned around from her. She thought it was Bigfoot.
Okay.
It turned around and it had a wolf face. And after she's having this, like, this is not a bear. I am seeing this. This is really happening.
Uh-huh.
This thing with like a werewolf type thing going on.
Right.
It disappeared. It
Holy
just
crap.
dematerialized in front of her. And so she went to the local she got out, she took off, but she went to like the local like bait store kind of out there in the country,
Right.
went in shaking, just like, this thing just happened. I just saw this thing, and everyone's just kind of looking at her like,
Right.
oh. But yeah, they're,
But nobody, but see, and that's the kind of thing that sometimes people just want to like, I need to tell somebody like, and I think that's even, how's this? Because I think again, because going back to the Patterson film and everything, we're kind of like, yeah, Bigfoot, Bigfoot. But if you see something along the lines of that looks like a werewolf, you're like, uh, you know, oh, this thing is gonna eat me. It could outrun me. It could kill me. Like, how do I get out of here?
yeah.
Uh, this
And
is like
that's,
this is an apex predator kind of deal.
I'd say apex and then some.
And then some, yes.
The reports we have heard, and like the stories and encounters that I've heard from other people, are that's next level stuff, and originally when we were going to do all these different kind of, paranormal things for the original documentary, I mentioned to Brett, oh, and we can go talk to this person about Dogman, and there's a Dogman sighting over here. Brett just looked at me. He's like, "Who's Dogman?" He thought it was
Yes.
is like, some like researcher's code name or something. I was like, Brett, Dogman is, and I was trying to explain, like,
All
well,
right.
people have had werewolf sightings, and there's these like dog soldier type,
Yeah.
sightings, blah blah blah. And he looked at me and said, Jill, let's try to get people, on the same page as far as, believing that Bigfoot is real. And once we do that, then we can move on and
Let me
talk
tell you
about
something. As a
Dogman.
matter of fact, that movie Dog Soldiers is a pretty good descriptor of what people describe as dog soldiers. I mean, as
Yeah.
a dog man. Yes, yes. And I tell everybody this. I'm going to go real quick. Back in the early 2000s, since I was doing paranormal stuff, I would always have these weird emails, people sending me emails. And I assumed it sounded like a young guy. He sends me an email. That's the same thing that we talked about. Like, I need to get this off my chest. And he didn't say, I'm going to assume it sounded like some type of Midwest state. He had gone hunting. And I'm doing, by the way, the condensed version of the story, where he goes out with his father and a group of men. I guess they're all hunting. Some of them see something that later on he doesn't know what it is. He all of a sudden his father says, "We're leaving." He says he sees them talking, his dad, and he says, "Man, I knew my dad when he was scared he'd get mad." And he just told him, "Throw yourself in the truck. We're leaving." And he's like, "What?" He's like, "What? What do you mean? Get it? We're leaving." Okay. Fast forward a few days. This is in the email. He's one of the first to get home after school, and he says I usually will go to the kitchen to get something to eat, and I hear something upstairs, like a creak, like somebody's upstairs. And he's thinking, that's weird. Who's gonna be upstairs? Like, so he kind of described where his stairs did like up, and then they switch back, to the hallway upstairs. And he says he comes up on this landing, and I guess I'm thinking the way I imagine the landing, you can kind of like look down the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then but he says that all of a sudden he hears also like a growling, and he's thinking that's weird. He says because we kept our dogs outside, the dogs weren't allowed, like they weren't inside the house. So he's like growling, but he says he comes up to the landing. All of a sudden he looks down the hallway. He didn't call it a dog man, by the way. When he sent me that email, it was just early 2000s. It wasn't a dog man. He didn't say dog man. He said it's something. He looked like a werewolf, like a big giant werewolf thing. And it was standing in that you said that about that a port. That's what came to mind when. And he says that he just saw this and he didn't finish going up the stairs. He says he like jumped over like the banister of the stairs, and he said he ran to his grandparents' house. So I'm assuming that his grandparents were like close by. He says that finally it took him a while. He comes around and he tells his dad about it. He says, "Oh," he goes, "after that I never came home before somebody was home with me." He goes, like, in other words, I would go to a friend's house, I would go to my grandparents' house. I never came home to be by myself until everybody else was there. So he says a little while after that, he talks to his dad and he tasks his dad, "Hey, why did we leave that day so suddenly on that hunting trip?" And he goes, "Well, no, there was one of the guys who had gone out. I guess they were getting ready to go, I don't know, putting up a blind. I don't know what he was doing. Sees what he describes again. He said like a werewolf, and he says, again, doesn't use the verbiage of a dog man out there. And the guy was totally shaken up, comes back and talks to them. And they call another guy over. And this other man who's familiar with the area says, look, I've never seen that, but I have heard of people in this area, outdoorsmen, seeing what he described. I think we should all leave, you know? And his father told him, and by the way, the guy that says that saw him, he goes, I know that man. And he's not a liar. He would not lie. So then he tells his dad what happened. And his father gets all upset, goes like, oh, and he says that right after he sees that, he says that in that area. So I'm going to assume it was rural. People started losing like livestock and chickens. But then it just died away. It stopped. And his father was like, why didn't you tell me that? And he said, for the same reason you didn't tell me your story when back then, like, it wasn't like a long time afterwards that him and his father had that conversation. And again, it's what you were talking about. That dog man word wasn't used, but and in the email, it was, I think I want to say it's the same thing what you described where people, I got to tell somebody about this. All right. And since you deal in the paranormal, you probably hear a lot of weird stuff. Back then, when I read the story in the email, I was like, wow. And I just put that email away. It was like, I hadn't heard really about dogmen, nothing like that. I was like, man, that's a way out story there. Okay. But why not? It wouldn't be the first time I'd heard weird stuff. And then fast forward as the years have gone by and this thing of dogman has come into the lexicon of people having the sightings. I'm thinking, wait a minute, this sounds like what this kid saw years back. And the one part that I've heard this afterwards from other people, that it was at his house. And I have heard of people who have had dogman sightings where somehow or other this thing ends up coming into the area where they live at. And it's like, how does that work? How does, and then that's where it gets kind of fuzzy on the edges as to how that happens.
Yeah.
How did the dog man get in his house? I mean, it was like
a lot of people talk about being tagged, and having these things follow them home.
Like an imprint.
There's a gentleman in Louisiana who's an experiencer and researcher by the name of Scott Pace. And he has a fantastic, not Bigfoot dogman experience that kind of unfolded at the same time.
Okay.
And if you can, I know his interview is out there, but
okay.
But we wanted to feature him in our sequel, but we just weren't able to get out to Louisiana.
He's down in Louisiana,
from Oregon. Yeah, but he has quite the story, and the story continued at home.
Yes. This is what I find like. That's like, okay, besides the fact that you see something that you only think is in the movies, the next thing you know, this thing is like, knows where you live. How's that? Talk about something to worry about. It knows where you live. Jill, it's been wonderful to talk to you. For my podcast listeners, where can they find you at?
You can visit us. The best way to find us is on YouTube. Our
Okay.
channel is called A Flash of Bigfoot.
Okay.
And, our movies are on Amazon, iTunes, Tubi, and you can always find us on Facebook under A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed.
Excellent. Excellent. And I will put a link to your YouTube channel here in the credits of the show. It's been great to talk to you. I love, and you could
This has
tell
been
it's like,
fun.
it's like, makes my weird little heart happy, you know? I love these conversations because, I'm the kind of, and I tell everybody, it's not that I believe but I always leave myself open because I think there's a lot of stuff out here that just because, how's this? You can't reproduce in a laboratory, which is what a lot of scientists want. They want you to be able to reproduce in a laboratory. They want to, there's a lot out there that just can't be done, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Absolutely. And if I can just add one closing thought,
Sure.
the thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to make the paranormal normal. We need to
Hmm.
normalize these conversations and remove the stigma so
Yes,
people will share their experiences. We all have a piece of the puzzle, and by sharing our stories and our encounters, we can help other people cope and understand what they're trying to figure out as well.
absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, and I tell everybody, despite these last few years where the paranormal shows and everything have kind of like made it more mainstream, there's still a lot of stigma attached. People don't realize that. That's why people sometimes are very keep back the stories of their experiences because they're like, nah, I'm just not going to risk it being that person.
Yeah.
Again, thank you so much. And I want to wish you, are you working on, you said that you were working on something now?
We are currently working on the documentary based on Ron Moorhead's book, Voices in the
Okay.
Wilderness, about the
Okay.
Sierra sounds that they
Mhm.
recorded up in the hills in Northern
Yes,
California.
God, I'm telling you, that is like, again, thank you so much. And I want to wish you the best of luck in all your projects. Okay.
Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Absolutely. I'll be following you guys. Take care.
Okay, take care.
See, you guys, like I said, I'm going to have a link to their YouTube channels because this is what I like. You know, they have interviews with regular people, normies, if you want to call them. In other words, yes, they do interview people that are, if you want to call it, into the Bigfoot community as far as researchers or like Ron Moorhead that he's been doing it for years and years. But they also interview people that, for lack of a better word, are living their lives and have encounters. In other words, they're not looking for it. But see, this is how's this? I'm not going to say that people that are out there trying to have a Bigfoot encounter, their sightings or whatever happens is not legit. I'm not saying that. But I think that when you come across somebody that, for lack of a better word, stumbles across an experience because whether they're a hunter, an outdoor, whatever, they're berry picking, I don't know, that they have this, those to me are like, for like the legit ones, the ones where this person's not primed to make something out of nothing. It's like if you're out there looking for Bigfoot and it's like, oh, that, it's like, wait, no, no. This is a person who's, they're doing something else. And then things happen. As a matter of fact, it takes them even a minute to kind of like grasp the scenario, like what am I seeing or what am I hearing or what is that? That's like that 9 foot whatever that is. All right. Because your brain does like a mental checklist of the possibilities, like as in normal possibilities, until it gets to the no, it's not that, not that, not that, and not that. So that means that what's that? And these are those interviews to me are the most fascinating ones. And like I said, sometimes people have that one experience in their lifetime. That's it, the one. Then there's other people that have more frequent ones, especially let's say if they live in an area where, let's say, Bigfoot sightings are more frequent. So, it just makes sense that they're going to And then there's people that it starts off that way. It starts off with a casual encounter, and then they go seeking it, or in some cases the Bigfoot or whatever comes to them. That guy Jim Smith, like I told you, he passed away. Alabama Bigfoot Society. He told me that at some, because again he lived in some rural part of Alabama, and he says he would go out. He says that they had an area out in the woods. He says it was like I guess it was like a desiccated stump. He says he would leave out there like sardines, in a can, like opened and stuff like that. And I remember when I asked him, I said, well, you know, Jim, how do you know it wasn't the million and one animals out there that could have like, and he goes, because it would put the empty can right back on the stump. Like no animal that's going to eat this is going to take and put the can right back, like just empty, back on the stump. So he says that for years he was doing this thing of taking out like little, I guess, little food things here and there, and he would just leave it there. And one of the things, though, that one time we talked about, he was telling me, he says that there was this lady, she lived by herself, same thing, very rural area, and like basically, once, she had her immediate area around her house was cleared, but then after that was just woods, like wherever it goes. He goes, and she started making these, she started doing that imitation calls that you hear about the supposedly the Bigfoot's doing. And she says she started doing these Bigfoot calls from the back porch. And he said that for a while nothing happened, one of those things, those experiments. But then she started getting calls, and then it was, that what's that saying about be careful what you wish for, because apparently, from what he told, if I remember correctly, she had like a couple of sheds like on the outer edge of her property that was cleared, and one of those light posts, and all of a sudden she started seeing movement out there, like, and then the calls were coming closer, and we were talking about, like, you know what, sometimes people do these imitation Sasquatch calls, but do you really know what you're saying? Do you understand that for all you know you might be doing a mating call? We were talking about that, like, that sometimes, I mean, I understand the idea is to encourage what's the word, contact, or like, hey, it's cool, I sound just like you do. But that's like when you go someplace and you don't know the language, and you, for all you know, you could be saying curse words, or your mother's ugly, or God knows, same thing. What if and then after that, she started she started hearing thumping, like, like when you, something's along the side of your walls of your house. And in other words, it came to the point she stopped doing it. She stopped doing it because she says that first of all, she lived by herself out there, and second of all, I guess she really thought of it. Like when people think one thing is in theory and another thing is in practice. Like one of them was like, oh, I'm going to do the Bigfoot call, and maybe Bigfoot will call back, and then kumbaya moment will happen. Yeah, except all of a sudden Bigfoot is stalking your yard, and you hear it thumping along your walls at night. And what was it? There was something that I can't remember if it was that whether I think if I remember correctly, at some point she found like she had like this little patio furniture on the porch, and it was like, one time she comes out, it was like, like the patio furniture was like twisted, like, and that was like the point where she said, no more Bigfoot calls, no more of that. Because as she started getting concerned, she started realizing, and she said also that I guess she had poultry and things like that, and that all the interestingly, all the animals, of course, are like, they were wigging out. She says she could hear her animals in the barn, and I guess in the area where she kept them, like wigging out, like, and in other words, these animals understood this is dangerous. This is not the berry picking. What was it? Harry Henderson kind of thing from the movies. This is a predator. And she says that after that, she stopped doing the calls. And then it took a while for it to fade away and stop. But yeah, it was one of these things where it's very admirable that you thinking, oh, I want to reach out to this, whatever it is, whatever a Bigfoot is. But when you don't understand exactly what you're dealing with, you have to be really, really careful. All right, you have to be really careful. And I'm sure people that are familiar and have heard of different Bigfoot Sasquatch stories, there's times people that normally go out there to have encounters, there'll be times with everything is copacetic, it's wonderful, it's lovely, and they'll hear far off calls or knockings or whatever. And then there's times that there's something wrong, there's something going on, there's a thing like, this is not a good day to be here, a good night to be here, we need to get out of here. All right, there's people that will tell you that no, or they have felt, because you'll have people say, well, I felt like going along with the Bigfoot theory, I was being stared at, I was being looked at. But it was like this thing of I'm being looked at versus I'm being looked at and I want to take your head off. All right. In other words, that there's a menace to it. As in, I gotta get out of here because I'm on the short end of this stick, real short. And this will come from people that are very experienced in the outdoors. They understand what are the animals out there, what's dangerous, what's not. And they've said, and they in other words, they couldn't say, this specifically. It was just the feeling, I think part of us that maybe we don't understand ourselves is telling your lizard brain, get out, like from the way, get out. Yeah, well, that kind of deal. And they'll tell you, and when you follow your instinct is like, yeah, I'm not going to stay around to find out why my brain is telling me, get out. So yeah, that thing with the pair, and I know there's people out there that it's like, oh, Bigfoot, he's so cuddly and nice, and he's just misunderstood. I'm sorry. I think Bigfoot, let's leave the interdimensional mystical aspect out of the equation. I think Bigfoot is an animal, maybe a very highly intelligent animal, but like all animals, has its quirks. It's even its own distinct personality, depending on which one. I think that like animals, there's times that you have to be careful when you're around them, as in when they have young. You'll hear from anybody that you want to be an animal around an animal when it's dangerous. It's when a mother is around its young, when they're trying to protect their young, or just something about them that we don't understand because we really don't know about them. We don't know what their life cycle is like. We don't know. A lot of it is assumed. How's that? What is their what is it? Again, like I was talking about, during mating season, it's like steer clear of everybody. All these animals want to do, especially males, is mate. All they're looking for, and they see anything else that's as in a human, as stupid as it sounds, as a competition, because at that point this is their mating season, and they're maybe the nature of their species is where males compete for that one female. All right, this is something that's bred into them. That's part of their nature. So even if there's not another Bigfoot male next to them, their brain is wired a certain way where, hey, right now I'm looking for my female, or I sent her, and anything that might come and take my female or my chance of reproducing, I'm gonna knock its head off, or I'm ready to challenge it. But that's nature. Come on, you know what Dr. Malcolm from Jurassic Park said? Life finds a way. And one of those life finds a way is competition among males, let's say, to find viable females, in other words, that are, let's say the dog thing in heat, like most of the animals, that there's just like a certain time. If you look at nature, not all females will get pregnant randomly. There's a window of time where maybe they go into menarche or into the heat, where if you don't catch them then, they're not, first of all, they're not going to deal with you. They're going to fight you, and they can't get pregnant. All right. So the males know, hey, that female that's putting off that scent, and this is the time of year. If I don't get to her, it's over. That could account for a lot of, when you hear what she said about the that they charge, or you could feel like, hey, that you're not being welcomed, or it's not like that. Oh, that it's all good. We're looking at you and observing you. It's like, you need to get out of here. I've read a lot of Bigfoot encounters that detail something along those lines. All right. I personally think that that's usually a good reason. Territory, mating, young, having the young or offspring around, and or, like I said, if you have an animal that's hurt, animals when they're hurt, even when usually when animals are sick and dying, they kind of go off somewhere and die. Like maybe they're old, or just they're sick, they're diseased. They'll just let go somewhere. But if they've been hurt, especially if it's recent, and they're hurting, just like humans, this is when you're at your worst. It's like, don't touch me, don't look at me. Ah! And I think that sometimes might account for scenarios where people will have stories of aggressive Bigfoots. And let's not even go into the dog man thing. That's like a whole different story. But anyway, guys, I hope you like this interview with Jill. I think it's fascinating. Let me tell you something. That work that she's doing with Ron Moorhead, that's got to be really interesting. And yes, by all means, visit her. I'm gonna look up that thing, that dark matter monsters. I gotta look that up, because whether you want to look at the, how can I say it, when it's dark matter or physics or anything as the explanation for things we can't understand, and all of a sudden everything's being dumped in the physics or misunderstood or unknown or not fully understood physics of our dimension as the real explanation for whatever. That's okay, but we can't also just put it all on, physics as being why we can't see certain things when they're in front of us, or why, let's say what she was talking about, like in a port, stuff like that, or like let's say when a hair sample disappears and then reappears. Interesting. Let me tell you some very interesting times we live in. So anyway, guys, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. Go to mppellicer.com, and from Substack, I'll send you a newsletter about maybe once, a couple of times a week, if that much. Depends if I can get around to it. I do articles. I put stuff on my archive, old interviews or podcast versions of the shows, things of that nature. Go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, mppellicer.com. Again, I'm on all the major podcast platforms across the board. Spotify, I'm in Apple, Stories of the Supernatural, Nightshade Diaries, Supernatural Storytime, Eerie.news, iHeartRadio, you name it, you can find me. Also, besides YouTube, I'm on Rumble, I'm on BitChute, I'm on CloutHub, etc., etc., etc. Till next time, guys, take care. You are all wonderful. And again, I've got some great guests coming on. I think you're really going to enjoy. Till then.